Mrs. Sam slowly took off her apron and moved towards the front of the house to open the gate. A yellow-orange Vespa, engine idling, drove in. Mrs. Sam nodded gently in greeting. "Oh, Miss Thou, you're back." The rider was a beautiful young woman named Thou. Hearing her housekeeper's familiar greeting, Thou smiled gently, lowered the kickstand, and reached up to remove her helmet. It was already late afternoon, but the air still felt heavy with the lingering heat of the day. Her white shirt, worn under a sun-protective jacket, was drenched in sweat the moment she took the jacket off. A few strands of hair clung to her forehead, escaping the clip that held the rest in place. She tucked her keys into her expensive Louis Vuitton bag. Thou looked at Mrs. Sam and asked, "Auntie Sam, I'm back. Has Quynh returned yet?" Mrs. Sam quickly closed the gate, bustling inside as she replied, "No, Miss Quynh hasn't come home yet, dear." Thou placed her bag on the table and accepted a cool glass of water from Mrs. Sam's hand. "Thank you. Why is she so late today, Auntie? Usually, she'd be back by now." "She's probably busy with school. I heard her say she had a Japanese class today, so she'd be home late. Oh, I'll go take a shower first. It's been so hot from morning till now. When you're done with dinner, if she's back, we'll eat right away." Thou's silhouette ascended the stairs leading to the second floor. The two words, "my home," always brought joy to Mrs. Sam's heart. Mrs. Sam was from the same village as Mr. Dack, the father of Thou and Quynh. Mrs. Sam's appearance was rather modest, and she was already over 50 without ever having found love. Due to her kind and honest nature, Mr. Dack had invited her to work as a housekeeper for his family. After his two daughters grew up, Mr. Dack built them a spacious villa on Nguyen Kong Street, and Mrs. Sam moved in with her two young mistresses. Mr. Dack had two daughters. Thou was the elder, 28 years old this year, and the director of a fashion company. Mrs. Sam felt that Thou was open-minded, as beautiful as a flower, and had many suitors. In contrast to her older sister's personality, the younger daughter, Quynh, was quite reticent. Quynh's beauty was no less striking than Thou's. The common trait between the two sisters was their politeness. They treated Mrs. Sam like family, confiding in her whenever they needed to. Mrs. Sam, without a husband or children, was treated with such kindness that she had long considered Mr. Dack's family, especially her two young mistresses, as her own, with a deeply intimate bond. Bringing dinner from the kitchen to the living room, Mrs. Sam had just set the meal down when Thou emerged from the bathroom. Sitting down and drying her hair, Thou asked, "Auntie, has the little one still not returned? Let me call her and see." Before she could dial her sister's number, the sound of a Vespa echoed from outside the gate. Mrs. Sam hurried back out. A moment later, Quynh walked into the house with a cheerful smile. The two sisters chatted for a while, and then all three sat down for dinner. Dinner concluded at 7 p.m. After a quick shower, Quynh put on a light purple dress adorned with small floral patterns. After a light touch-up, she headed downstairs where Mrs. Sam and Thou were watching TV. Seeing her sister meticulously preparing to go out, Thou curiously asked, "Quynh, where are you going?" "I'm meeting an old friend, sis," Quynh replied. Thou frowned blankly. "Which friend?" Quynh immediately stammered, "An old friend, sis. We're grown-ups now, 22 years old, not little kids that you have to be so strict with, even more so than Mom." Thou pushed her glasses up and pouted, saying, "I don't forbid you from playing with anyone. But that guy, Tuan, I absolutely forbid it. He's a brute, greedy, and lazy. I absolutely don't approve of you seeing him." Quynh raised her eyebrows and teased, "Yes, ma'am, my difficult young mother. What will you be like when you're almost 30? Mrs. Sam chuckled and then advised, "Miss Quynh, please come home early. I'll be waiting to lock the door." Quynh leaned her head against Mrs. Sam's neck, pouting at her sister. "See, only Auntie Sam loves me the most. No one else can compare." Thou was about to grab her sister, but Quynh quickly darted out. Her Vespa engine roared to life. Quynh turned back to look at the two of them and nodded. "Sis, Auntie, I'm leaving." As Quynh rode away, Mrs. Sam felt her heart skip a beat, a sense of loss rising within her, an unsettling premonition. She reached out, intending to call out to her young mistress, but Quynh's retreating figure on the pale orange Vespa merged into the stream of traffic. Mrs. Sam stood rooted, her hand clutching the gate, watching. It wasn't until the scooter disappeared around the street corner that she sadly turned back inside. From that moment on, an uneasy feeling, difficult to shake off, settled within Mrs. Sam. As was their daily habit, before bedtime, Thou and Mrs. Sam went to sit on the swing outside and drink tea. Underneath a magnolia tree, a faint fragrance permeated the air. Thou had installed 2 swings and a lovely white table. The elder and the younger woman busied themselves, bringing out the tea tray. They sat and chatted for over 3 hours, discussing everything under the sun. Thou quickly poured 2 cups of tea, pushing one towards Mrs. Sam. Thou urged her to drink with a cheerful tone, but Mrs. Sam only started after being called 3 times. Noticing Mrs. Sam's distracted and troubled look, Thou became curious. "What's wrong, Auntie? Why do you look so dazed?" "Oh, nothing. I just suddenly feel a churning in my stomach, dear." Before Thou could ask anything further, both of them suddenly looked towards the gate. The swing set to the right of the main gate was only a few steps away, so everything was clearly visible. Before Quynh left, Thou had told Mrs. Sam to close the gate. It was an old habit, difficult to break, to only secure the tall gate just before going to bed. But as the gate was closed and the neon light above it flickered, a dog suddenly ambled in. It was a scruffy yellow stray, thin as a stick, with wet fangs, undoubtedly a wild dog. The dog turned its head to look at the 2 women on the swing for a few seconds, then ignored them and trotted directly into the house, whimpering as if ill. To their surprise, the dog found its way to the front door and lay down, its face turned outwards, letting out a soft whimper. Witnessing this, Thou was very surprised, but even more so when Mrs. Sam suddenly sprang up. She quickly snatched up a sandal and threw it directly at the dog. Weak as it was, the stray dog darted away very quickly. Mrs. Sam chased the dog out to the gate, then swiftly slammed it shut before returning to the swing with a worried expression. Thou, observing this, was utterly bewildered. "Auntie, why are you acting so strangely? Don't people say that cats coming to the house bring bad luck, but dogs bring good luck? Why did you chase it away?" Mrs. Sam looked at her young mistress with a bewildered gaze, then shook her head. "It's not quite like that, dear. According to the old folks' beliefs I've heard, only dogs can distinguish between good and evil. They guard the gate, preventing evil spirits from entering the house. That's why people believe a dog coming to the house is good fortune. However, there's something people don't often know. If a dog suddenly whines at the door, it's a bad omen. If a dog lies down at the front door with its face turned outwards, it means someone in the house will soon leave the family. And then," Mrs. Sam hesitated, unable to speak, making Thou's curiosity grow. "And then what, Auntie? Why are you so vague?" "Then it's an omen that someone in the house will die soon." Thou recoiled in horror. "That's terrifying. I'm so scared, Auntie." Mrs. Sam looked mournful. "This is what the elders taught us. I don't know if it's true or false, but if there's an omen, there's a reason. Please wait for me for a moment." Then Mrs. Sam went inside to get a handful of salt and sprinkled it at the gate. As she turned back to sit on the swing, both of them gasped again. Opposite where they sat was a row of ornamental bamboo, with golden yellow stems bent horizontally, as tall as an adult. Right beneath that clump of bamboo, their eyes fell upon an extremely grotesque sight. From a hole in the ground, 4 large rats scurried out. The lead rat ran as if fleeing a predator. The 3 rats behind it bit the tail of the one in front, forming a chaotic procession. Very quickly, the 4 rats scurried out through a gap in the gate and into the yard. Thou found the sight amusing and was about to turn to Mrs. Sam when she suddenly froze. Mrs. Sam sat rooted to the spot, her mind strained, sweating profusely, murmuring to herself. Her eyes welled up with tears, but she didn't care. Her face turned pale, as if she'd been struck by a gust of cold wind. Thou had to call her twice before she responded with a low moan. Not waiting for her young mistress to ask, Mrs. Sam's face darkened and she stammered, "Miss, please call and see if Quynh is okay. My heart is racing. It's definitely a bad omen, dear." Thou froze. "Auntie, why are you so strange tonight? What bad omen?" Mrs. Sam suddenly burst into tears, stammering, "The ancients taught that if rats appear in the house during the day, it's a sign of financial loss. But if at night, rats suddenly bite each other's tails and run out of the house, it means misfortune, like someone dying. I'm so worried, miss." Thou also suddenly felt a tightening in her stomach. She pulled her phone from her pocket, looked at the clock. It was past 10 p.m., and her sister still wasn't home. A sudden sense of unease settled over her too. Normally, her sister would always inform her when she arrived somewhere and when she'd be back. Yet, after more than 3 hours, there was no news. Thao quickly dialed Quinn's number, but on the other end there were only soulless beeps. Beside her, Mrs. Sam urged, "Miss, how is it? Have you reached her?" Thao shook her head. "Not yet, Auntie. Let me try contacting her close friends." She frantically called all of Quinn's friends but found no trace of her sister. Thao's heart was now burning with anxiety. Waiting at home was unbearable. Even though it was almost 11 p.m., Thao rushed out to get her scooter. "Auntie, please wait for my call at home. If she comes back, call me right away. I'm going to check the usual spots she hangs out to see if she's there." Before Mrs. Sam could say anything, Thao's Vespa sped out onto the main road. Mrs. Sam quickly closed the gate and went inside, her heart pounding. She sat on the porch, her old black and white phone beside her, waiting. At this moment, she could only pray that these omens were mere coincidences, that these folk tales were nothing but groundless superstitions. Exhausted, with her head in her hands, her heart grew more tangled, her weight more desperate. The black and white phone, which Quynh had given her and patiently taught her how to use, lay still. From time to time, Mrs. Sam picked it up to check. But still, no one called. The more she waited, the more troubled her mind became, her heart burning like fire, and the feeling of unease made her feel somewhat unwell. Looking at the clock, it was almost midnight. Mrs. Sam felt her limbs grow numb. She struggled to get up, intending to walk around to shake off the anxiety that had weighed on her since dusk. Leaning on her hands to stand, she involuntarily looked across the lawn towards the gate. Through the sparse gate, she started when she saw a figure standing silently at the gate, staring intently into the house, giving her a fright. Once the initial shock passed, Mrs. Sam placed a hand on her chest, took a deep breath, and called out, "Who is it? Who's standing out there?" The figure remained silent, staring intently at Mrs. Sam, then slowly turned its back and walked out into the dimly lit alley, bathed in the pale yellow light of the lamp. Mrs. Sam found this strange and muttered, "How odd. Who would come at this hour and then turn and leave when I call?" Curious, Mrs. Sam approached the gate and peered out. She stepped fully outside. There was no one. The wide lawn of the house was empty, without a single hiding spot. Mrs. Sam called out, but when she stepped outside, she'd only been there for 5 seconds. How could that person have disappeared so quickly? She hadn't heard the sound of a motorbike or a car. Mrs. Sam cautiously looked in the direction the figure had gone, but saw no one. Just as she turned to close the gate and go back inside, she suddenly let out a soft cry. Behind her, Quynh was standing silently, having appeared from nowhere. She still had a lightly made-up face, hair tied up high, and wore the same light purple dress with tiny flowers. By natural reaction, Mrs. Sam recoiled a step, her hand flying to her chest, breathing heavily. Then she hurried forward and asked, "Oh heavens, where have you been, miss? Thao and I have been calling you endlessly. Thao even drove out to look for you. Come inside, you'll catch a cold and die." Mrs. Sam reached out to pull her young mistress inside, but immediately recoiled her hand, feeling as if she had touched ice water. She exclaimed, "Good heavens, why are you so cold, miss?" Suddenly, Quynh let out a small sob. The cry was so mournful and terrifying, it echoed faintly as if from some distant, dark place. Mrs. Sam's spirit faltered. She let go of Quinn's hand, trembling. "Miss, what's wrong? Why are you crying, and why so strangely? Come inside right away, miss." At that very moment, Quinn's beautiful face suddenly changed color. Her skin, once as white as a magnolia petal, turned a pale, ashen gray. The light purple dress suddenly had streaks of dried blood. Most horrifying of all, 2 streams of crimson blood oozed from the corners of Quinn's mouth. Her neck was grotesquely twisted to one side, with a prominent dark bruise encircling it. Mrs. Sam screamed in horror and stumbled backward, suddenly realizing it was all a nightmare. Her head throbbed as if struck by a hammer. She looked around in horror at the silent house. She was still sitting on the porch, the black and white phone still lying on the granite floor. She had been so exhausted she had fallen asleep, mumbling in her sleep. But the dream felt too real. The image of her beautiful young mistress with a blood-stained face and eyes staring at her like a haunting apparition terrified her even more. Mrs. Sam huddled in a corner of the front hall, her spirit plummeting into the deepest abyss. Her entire body felt icy cold, like someone wearing only a thin nightgown in winter, her face still etched with horror. After a moment of daze, she went into her room, pulled a thick blanket over herself, then went back out to wait, her heart still feeling heavy as if filled with water. A while later, as she sat with her head buried in her knees, she once again heard a heartbreaking wail from the gate. The mournful cry was exactly like the one in her recent dream, leaving her frozen to the spot. She gathered her courage, trembling with fear, and cautiously made her way outside. Every second felt like an eternity, each step was heavy as if she wore lead weights. The iron gate was once again wide open. The path looked empty, no one would come at this hour. Just as she was about to turn back inside, she heard the familiar sound of a vehicle accompanied by flashing headlights. Thau's Vespa arrived, and she quickly parked it inside. Thau looked pale as she asked, "Auntie, has she come back yet?" "No, dear, I've been sitting here waiting this whole time. Have you seen her at any of the places?" Thau took off her helmet and shook her head. "No sign of her. I've checked all the cafes and restaurants she usually goes to. I even asked them to check their CCTV footage, but she wasn't seen anywhere. I don't know where she could be." Mrs. Sam sniffled. "Should we call the police, dear? Miss Quynh has never stayed out all night before." Thau also understood her sister's nature. Quynh never stayed out overnight. Her sudden disappearance like this was truly unprecedented. Now, Thau's heart was also churning with anxiety and unease. Thau still tried to reassure her. "She's probably staying over at a friend's house, Auntie. Even if we call the police now, they won't do anything. It's almost 2 a.m. Auntie, please try to rest a little. She'll probably be back in the morning. I'll call my friend Vuong, he works at the local police station. We should report it early, just to be safe, Auntie." She said this, but Thau's heart was filled with worry. She had already contacted all of her sister's closest friends, but no one knew where Quynh had gone. This only confirmed that something was seriously wrong. After calling Vuong to report the situation, Thau urged Mrs. Sam to come inside as it was very late. Thau curled up on her separate bed, phone clutched in her hand. She continued to dial her sister's number, but still received only the operator's automated message. After a moment of heavy breathing, Thau felt her throat dry. She quietly made her way downstairs, intending to get some water. Before she could finish the glass, a soft sobbing sound suddenly came from outside the window, beside the house. Thinking Mrs. Sam was worried about Quynh and had gone to sit on the swing outside, Thau frowned, put her glass down, and crept towards the window. Peeking out, she saw the two-story villa with a narrow path of artificial grass. Next to it was the white swing set, now casting only a faint, ethereal glow. Thau reached out to switch on the neon light on the porch, but saw no one. Exhausted from overwhelming sleepiness, she turned off her phone, intending to go back upstairs. Before she reached the foot of the stairs, the persistent sobbing started again, this time right at the main door. Thau gasped and turned to look through the glass pane, but saw no one. Standing dazed for a moment, she mumbled, "Am I just imagining things because I'm sleepy?" Then she quickly reached for the switch at the bottom of the stairs. As the lights went out, the neighbor Mrs. Kong's garden, separated from their villa by only a small wooden fence, suddenly came alive. Mrs. Kong's beloved spotted dog, whom Thau knew well, was barking with a muffled, choked sound. Its front paws clawed at the fence, continuously letting out frantic whimpers, startling Thau. Despite the hot May weather day and night, her hair stood on end. The dog howled again, a long, eerie wail. A moment later, it barked repeatedly, its sharp claws scraping against the wall. Amidst the frantic whimpers outside, 3 abrupt, dry knocks resounded. Thau's heart leaped. She fumbled for the light switch and called out loudly, "Who's out there?" Her voice was met only by silence. The dog's barking also abruptly ceased, replaced by a weak whimper. Thau, now bolder, strode forward, switched on the living room light, and threw open the door. Outside, there was only empty silence. The front door was still quiet, there was no one there. Thau quickly closed the door, muttering, "I must have imagined it, I'm just so agitated." But as soon as the door closed, the scratching sound returned, distinct and clear. Immediately after, a rustling sound as if people were whispering outside the house followed. The dog howled again, a long, mournful sound. People say that when a dog howls like that, it means wandering spirits are nearby. Thau suddenly remembered this, and her whole body was covered in goosebumps. She retreated several steps, terrified to her core, her hand gripping the wall and the necklace she wore around her neck. She mumbled a prayer, "Namo Amitabha Buddha." From the front of the house, the mournful cries from earlier, along with the sound of footsteps, echoed again. Gathering all her courage, Thau went and threw open the glass door. As the door swung open, Thau gasped in horror and stepped back several paces. On the artificial turf lawn directly in front of her, about 10 steps away, stood a lone lock Vung asterisk tree with dense foliage. A shadowy figure of a woman was bent over beneath the tree, her long black hair falling down on both sides, slowly staring straight at Thao. Although the distance was quite close and the neon light shone brightly in the darkness of the night, the figure was obscured by the tree's shadow, and her hair covered her face, so Thao couldn't make out her features. But the figure looked eerily familiar. Thao's intuition screamed at her, and she rushed forward, exclaiming, "Quynh, when did you get back? I've been so worried about you." The long-haired figure stood still for a few seconds, then slowly walked away, disappearing beyond the silent iron gate. Thao stood frozen, dazed, her heart still pounding. The neighbor's dog continued to growl in its throat. The house became strangely silent, even a small sound sent chills down her spine. Thao shivered as if caught in a cold wind, realizing what she had just encountered. She nervously glanced around, quickly shut the door, then frantically ran up the stairs to her bedroom on the second floor. Miss, what's wrong? Why are you gasping like that?" Thao cried out and woke up, realizing she had fallen asleep on the bed. Beside her was Mrs. Sam's frightened face. Thao clung to Mrs. Sam tightly, like a drowning person grasping a lifeline. Without needing to be told, Mrs. Sam partially understood. Perhaps Thao had also just experienced a nightmare similar to hers. In that dream, Quynh had appeared with an omen of death. That night, amidst boundless anxiety, the two women sat by the lamplight on the sofa, neither able to sleep. The entire next day, Quynh remained unreachable. Following Lieutenant Vuong's advice, Thao clearly reported the incident to the police to aid in the search for her missing sister. Thao took Mrs. Sam to visit every relative and friend of Quynh's, but no one could provide any clues. After a morning of fruitless searching, it was almost noon when Lieutenant Vuong called to report. According to CCTV footage recovered by the police from local residents, Quynh was seen running along Phu Lang Street, then turning into a small road leading out to the outskirts. Beyond that, she disappeared. You need to stay calm and try to contact Quynh. Try to remember if she or her friends knew anyone in that direction. I'll let you know as soon as there's new information. Thao hung up the phone and looked at Mrs. Sam with a sorrowful gaze, accompanied by a slight shake of her head. The weather was turning dark and ominous, threatening heavy rain. Thao urged Mrs. Sam to get on the scooter. "I'll take you home now, Auntie. Maybe she's back there already. Please wait for news at home. If she returns, call me so I can rest assured. I have to go to a photo shop to print her picture and then ask around in the outskirts if anyone recognizes her." The scooter sped off. Mrs. Sam, still holding her helmet, asked, "Miss, should we inform your parents? I'm so worried." Thao immediately replied, "Not yet, Auntie. Dad is taking Mom for a checkup for her rheumatism tomorrow. Maybe Quynh is just having fun somewhere. If we tell Mom and Dad too soon, they'll worry. Mom has a heart condition, and I'm afraid if she overthinks things, it could be bad. She wouldn't want to come home without Quynh anyway." Thao gave Mrs. Sam a few more instructions before starting the engine and speeding away. Alone on the porch, Mrs. Sam's brow furrowed in despair. She sighed, intending to go inside and wash her face to clear her mind. She hadn't been able to sleep all night, worried about her young mistress. For the first time, she felt an unsettling emptiness in the spacious villa. She walked up to the second floor, gently pushed open Quynh's room door, and stepped inside. The room was painted a light purple, exactly the color of the dress Quynh wore the night she left, which made Mrs. Sam's heart ache with sadness. Closing the door quietly, she went into the bathroom to wash her face, then returned to the porch to wait. Outside, the sky had turned dark, thick black clouds covering the entire space. Just as she stepped into the living room, she gasped in fright. Quynh, in a crumpled dress with several bloodstains, was standing pressed against the door, her face close to the glass. Her blood-smeared fingers clawed at the glass pane, leaving 10 bloody streaks, and her eyes were wide, as if pleading for help. It was the same mournful cry, the same vague, echoing sounds, as if from a distant world, that filled Mrs. Sam with extreme terror. She stumbled back, falling to the floor, scrambling backward towards the door, muttering Quynh's name. But just like in her previous dream, Quynh silently turned and slowly walked out the gate, crossed the road, and vanished into the sparse traffic. Mrs. Sam, frantic, summoned all her strength and ran after her, muttering incoherently. Until she tripped and fell onto the lawn. She gasped and woke up, realizing it was just another dream. This time, Mrs. Sam was truly terrified. Was something really wrong with her young mistress? Why did Quynh appear to her like this whenever she dozed off? She weakly stood up, looking around in a daze. A sudden gust of wind sent chills down her spine. Although it was a hot summer afternoon, an undefined anxiety returned to torment her mind more intensely. She walked out onto the lawn and carefully examined the door where those 10 blood-stained fingertips had pressed. That slightly ajar doorkey had clearly seen Quynh standing there. Her sorrowful face in the light purple dress, exactly like the night before, appeared to her. Lost in thought on the porch, she suddenly started when she saw the faint figure of a girl in the backyard. Her heart pounding, she took a deep breath and rushed to the back of the house. As she walked, she called out loudly, "Quynh, when did you get back? Why didn't you say anything to me, you and Thou?" She stopped abruptly as her feet reached the back garden. There was no one there. Mrs. Sam stood rooted, looking around anxiously. She desperately held onto hope with another call, "Miss Quynh, where are you?" Her words were met only by the rustling of the wind through the trees. She leaned over, sighed, then returned to the front yard to await Thou's return. At this moment, the intuition of a woman who had lived more than half her life suddenly stirred. Mrs. Sam's mind raced with a sense of dread, for she was 100% certain that something terrible had happened to Quynh. She took a step back towards the porch, intending to go inside, but hesitated. The sky turned dark with rain clouds gathering rapidly. In an instant, a sudden downpour erupted. Mrs. Sam stood up and pressed against the door to avoid getting wet. Fortunately, the rain didn't last long. After about 15 minutes, the sky cleared again. She stood up, feeling refreshed, and walked to the roadside. Turning her head abruptly, she was once again startled to see Quynh's faint shadow in the backyard. She rushed in, but again saw nothing. Only the neighbor's spotted dog suddenly jumped out, barking furiously at the fence, terrifying her. She slowly walked forward, then went out to the gate, hunched over. 15 minutes earlier, on the deserted road leading out of town, Thou had stopped at a coffee shop to ask for CCTV footage and inquire if any staff had seen her sister, but no one had. Knowing it was a hopeless search, Thou still rode her scooter along the winding road towards the outskirts. A few minutes into her ride, it suddenly began to pour. May showers, though not long, were often heavy, feeling like water being thrown in one's face. Thou quickly sought shelter. Fortunately, there was a large roof along the roadside. The owner was probably not home, or perhaps the house had been abandoned for a long time, as grass grew on the walls and the door was locked from the outside. Thou parked her scooter, and at the same moment, another person rushed to seek shelter from the rain. The person wore thin clothing and a hat pulled low, but Thou guessed it was a woman because her build was similar to her own. Brushing away her water-soaked hair, Thou didn't immediately look up but quickly struck up a conversation with a casual remark. "What heavy rain! If we don't hurry, we'll catch a terrible cold." The other person spoke, but Thou only heard a soft whimper, perhaps due to the cold. Thou spoke again, but in response, besides the sound of the falling rain, there was nothing. The whimper from earlier also vanished. Thou turned back, startled. There had clearly been someone who came in to shelter from the rain with her, but in a blink, they were gone. Thou mumbled a few words, unsure if it was the stormy weather or this strange event that made her shiver. She looked around blankly for a while. There was only her and the space enveloped in the rainy sky. Thou's heart pounded, her teeth chattering. She confirmed to herself that someone had definitely rushed into the porch to shelter from the rain with her, so where had that person disappeared to? After a moment of tense breathing, the rain completely stopped. Thou quickly got on her scooter, started the engine, and rode off. A profound sense of unease rose in her heart. After driving about 10 meters, Thou glanced in her rearview mirror. On the porch where she had just sheltered from the rain, a pale, slender figure in a light purple dress was still standing there. In that fleeting moment of terror, Thou recognized her sister. Thou gasped, slammed on the brakes, and turned back. But strangely, there was no one on the porch. Thou stared in disbelief. At that moment, the blaring horn of a dump truck from the opposite direction pulled Thou back to reality. Thou shifted her gaze, looking carefully, but Quynh had truly vanished. Thou stood frozen for a long moment before speeding off, knowing that searching was futile. On her way home, she couldn't stop thinking about the strange incident earlier and the dream from last night. All the bizarre details could something truly terrible have happened to her sister. When she arrived at the villa, she saw Mrs. Sam huddled outside the gate. Seeing Thou, Mrs. Sam burst into frantic tears, but Thou herself was flustered, stopping the scooter and running towards her. Her face was ashen, as if drained of all blood, and she stammered, unable to speak. Thao had just experienced something so terrifying that even now, sitting beside Mrs. Sam, she still trembled as if struck by a gust of cold wind. Thao recounted every detail of what had happened in her bewildered state. Mrs. Sam covered her face, sobbing uncontrollably. "Miss, I just saw Quynh here. She was lingering outside there. But when I went out, there was no one. This means she's dead and become a ghost, my dear." Thao was stunned, utterly terrified. Could her sister truly be dead, and her ghost returning to warn them in a dream? Thao tried to compose herself and dialed her sister's number, but still couldn't connect. She quickly called Vuong, but the police had not yet found any clues. Amidst the urgent calls, sobs mixed with Mrs. Sam's sniffling. "Yes, Vuong. Have you verified with her friends yet? Is she in a relationship with anyone right now? Any strange behavior?" Thao paused for a few seconds, then whispered, Yes, she's acquainted with a guy named Tuan who lives in Long Bayan." Vuong quickly said, "All right, I'm almost done with work. I'll drive over to your place." Thao acknowledged and hung up. While waiting for Vuong to arrive, she urged Mrs. Sam to come inside with her, as the wind was growing stronger. They sat in sorrow all day, neither speaking a word to the other, each lost in their own thoughts. About half an hour later, the sound of a car horn broke the silence, bringing both of them back to reality. Mrs. Sam and Thao both rushed out to the gate. Vuong parked his car, looked at them with sympathy, and said, "Come inside, I have a few things I need to clarify." After Thao quickly handed Vuong a glass of water, Vuong took 3 large gulps, then lit a cigarette. He took a quick puff, then pulled out a small notebook and a pen and began to ask. "You said your sister had a boyfriend recently. What's his name? How old is he? What does he do for a living? Does he visit often?" Thao confirmed, "Yes, sir, I met him once. His name is Tuan, he's 24 years old. He repairs cars in Long Bayan. I think he's been to our house 2 or 3 times. Mrs. Sam excitedly interjected, "It's been 6 times, dear. I'm always at home, so I know." Vuong stopped writing and continued, "Auntie, do you have any impression of his appearance?" "Yes, sir. He's about 1.7 meters tall, thin as a reed with dyed blonde hair, an earring, and tattoos up to his neck. His face is quite handsome, but he curses a lot." Vuong nodded, then asked, "When was the last time you saw him, Auntie?" "The most recent time was about 7 or 8 months ago. If I remember correctly, I was sweeping the yard and saw him bring Miss Quynh home. They were arguing right outside the gate, and it seemed like there was some pushing and shoving. When I opened the gate, he had already sped off on his scooter, and Miss Quynh was holding her cheek and crying." Thao interjected, "She's very private, so I don't know anything more. But after Auntie Sam told me and I reviewed the footage, I had to forbid them from seeing each other. Since then, it's been exactly 7 months that they haven't been in contact." Vuong nodded and then asked, "When was the last time your sister left? What time was it, and what was she wearing?" Mrs. Sam quickly replied, "It was early evening, sir, precisely 7:15 p.m. My miss was wearing a light purple dress, a white rabbit helmet, purple shoes, and her scooter was orange, just like Miss Thao's." Vuong frowned, taking notes for a while, then closed his notebook and said, "Thao, can I take a look at your sister's room? Maybe we'll find some clues." "Yes, sir. Please follow me upstairs. Her room is at the end of the hallway on the 2nd floor." Vuong quickly followed Mrs. Sam and Thao upstairs. All 3 hurried into the room, which was filled with a cold, purple hue. Before they could even check the desk, the bedroom door suddenly burst open with an invisible force, slamming against the wall with a loud bang. A gust of wind rushed in, startling all 3 of them, making them look in that direction. Mrs. Sam quickly reached for the window, closed it carefully, and said, "Why is the wind so strong this season?" Vuong looked at her, then glanced down at the bamboo thicket in front to the right of the villa's facade. Mrs. Sam flinched, then recoiled in horror, joining her hands and stammering, "There's someone standing in the thicket downstairs." Before Vuong and Thao, who were rummaging through books and papers on the desk, could react, hearing Mrs. Sam's panicked stammering, they quickly ran to her side, gripping her arm. Both stared, then turned to Vuong. Vuong frowned and asked again, "Someone, who?" "There's no one there, Auntie." Mrs. Sam looked down at the front yard where the bamboo thicket was as tall as her shoulder, then insisted, "There's clearly a girl standing there with her hair down. Her face is hidden by the bamboo, so I can't see it clearly, but she's staring intently at this room." Vuong looked again to confirm, then asserted, "There's no one there. The yard is so wide, where would she hide? And there's a tall wall around here and the gate is locked. You must have imagined it, Auntie." Mrs. Sam insisted, "No, there definitely is, sir. She was peeking out from behind the bamboo thicket, staring up here. Could she have hidden in the storage room in the back of the house, sir?" Vuong's expression tightened and he said, "If you don't believe me, let's go check the room. If an intruder got in and only two of you are home, it could be dangerous." So, with their suspicions, all three went downstairs. As they reached the stairs, Mrs. Sam heard a faint sobbing sound mixed with the wind. While the three women hurried downstairs without knowing, Quynn's bedroom door slowly opened. At this point, Vuong's words went in one ear and out the other for Thao. She was solely focused on confirming if Mrs. Sam's words were true, if there was someone hiding in the garden. Mrs. Sam was certain she hadn't imagined it, because that person had truly stood silently in the dim corner, where the light didn't quite reach, staring up at the room with a scrutinizing gaze that genuinely terrified her. All three quickly approached the bamboo to observe. At this point, Vuong spoke loudly. "Auntie, you say a woman was standing here, so where did she hide? And even if she stood here, there should be footprints on the soft ground, right?" Thao nodded in agreement. Mrs. Sam stood silently for a few seconds, then mumbled, "How strange, she was clearly standing here just a moment ago. Where did she go in a flash?" Then Mrs. Sam turned and urged, "Or perhaps you should check the storage room in the back garden, I have the key." Vuong nodded, pleased, accepting the bunch of keys. He opened his mouth to agree with Thao's idea. The large brass padlock was removed and light from the wall shone in. All three observed carefully. The storage room was completely empty, without a single hiding spot. The floor was laid with red tiles, matching the color scheme of the altar on the second floor. Vuong stepped in, spread his arms, and said, "See, there's no one here. Are you relieved now, Auntie Sam?" Mrs. Sam pondered, quickly locked the door, and hurried with the two others back into the house to retrieve the case file. Vuong sighed and said, "My team will focus on finding your sister's whereabouts and verifying Tuan's relationships and movements. I'll inform you immediately if there's any news. I also hope nothing bad has happened and that she's just out playing somewhere." Thao quickly closed the gate, then gloomily returned to the house, sitting with short breaths and long sighs. After a quick dinner, Mrs. Sam told Thao to go to bed, as Thao looked utterly exhausted. Left alone in the living room, Mrs. Sam secretly wiped away tears. After a while of dozing on the sofa, Mrs. Sam was about to fall into a deep sleep when she was startled awake by a faint, whimpering cry in the dead of the silent night. The mournful cry was very clear, unmistakable. However, the crying sounded as if carried by the wind, sometimes near, sometimes far, sometimes completely gone, then suddenly loud right beside her ear. Mrs. Sam listened intently. Thao had curled up on the opposite sofa. Besides her, there was no one else in the house, and none of the neighbors had such a strange voice. Pushing open the main gate, she stood up, then carefully slid back the golden latch, gently opened the white painted door, and stepped out onto the lawn in front. It was a moonless night. The faint light of the distant stars illuminated the space indistinctly. Although faint and weak, that light was enough to dimly illuminate the bamboo thicket and a few hanging orchid pots. From this porch, Mrs. Sam could observe the entire villa but couldn't see the right side of the house. Turning in that direction, she saw the neighbor's spotted dog clinging to the fence, looking across. The dog wasn't looking at her but was focused on the corner of the yard where the white table stood, soaked with water, and where she and her two mistresses often sat and chatted after meals on the swing. The dog didn't bark. Its fur stood on end, and its eyes stared as if hypnotized. Mrs. Sam closed her eyes, then opened them, as if she couldn't believe her eyes. In the long, silent night, standing still in the wind, the iron swing was gently swaying, as if someone was sitting there, pushing it. A soft creaking sound echoed rhythmically. Mrs. Sam recoiled in horror. The white outline surrounding the swing looked exactly like a shadowy figure sitting there, pushing its feet. Mrs. Sam didn't want to believe her eyes, yet couldn't deny the movement of the swing. Above the swing, a faint white mist hovered, like the shadow of a person sitting with their head slightly bowed and long black hair cascading down. Mrs. Sam felt a chill of fear pierce her, an invisible force pulling her closer. She hesitantly approached. When she was about 6 steps from the swing, she suddenly stopped. The swing was motionless, no longer swaying. Mrs. Sam felt bewildered. Was she hallucinating, or was she simply losing her mind? Perhaps she was too tired, causing her to see things. The swing lay still. The shadowy figure she had seen was also gone, so what had she just seen? A ghostly thought flashed through her mind, and she began to feel afraid. But what good was fear now? She was already standing so close to the swing with the thought born of fear. If you're scared, don't go. If you go, it's too late to run. Then, the characteristic composure of a calm woman appeared, albeit with a temporary, hardened demeanor. The neighbor's dog was no longer by the fence. It had jumped down and ambled back to its kennel not far away, then curled up and lay down. Mrs. Sam hesitantly sat down beside the swing, observing the empty villa. When her gaze swept up to the second-floor balcony, where Quynn's bedroom was, Mrs. Sam's heart again skipped a beat. Her breath caught in her throat. The upstairs bedroom door was wide open, and the bedside lamp inside was on. As her eyes passed the white sleeping curtain, Mrs. Sam felt a shadow quickly dart past. In a moment of sheer panic, she quickly rushed into the house and frantically ran up the stairs. Thao, deeply asleep from exhaustion, was startled by the running footsteps and woke up, then rushed after her. Reaching the second-floor landing, Thao saw Mrs. Sam in a panic and asked, "What is it, Auntie?" Mrs. Sam didn't answer. She rushed to throw open Quynn's bedroom door. The room was still closed, the window shut, and the lamp was still dark. Turning on the switch, Mrs. Sam sank to the floor, defeated. Tears streamed down her face. The fear from earlier had vanished, replaced by a surge of unease. She pointed to the curtain and said, "It was her, dear. She came back again. She's moving around in this room. 10-1, she's really. I'm so worried, miss." Thao's heart was a mess. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. As she stood frozen in her sister's bedroom, the phone in the living room rang. Both were startled, looked at each other, then rushed downstairs. On the other end of the line was Lieutenant Vuong's voice. "Thao, is that you? Based on the information you provided, I've managed to track down the young man named Tuan to gather information. However, he's been locked in his room for the past month. It's possible your sister's disappearance is connected to him." Thao's limbs grew numb, and she sank to the floor, engulfed in boundless despair. Their only lead had led to a dead end. Where else could they look? Although nothing could be definitively confirmed, through the continuous terrifying events, Thao's intuition told her that her sister was no longer among the living. On one hand, the two women could only rely on the authorities' investigation. On the other hand, Thao still tried to hide the truth from her mother. Mr. Dak was undergoing treatment in Singapore, and Thao's mother had accompanied him there to care for him. Her mother also had a history of heart disease, and Thao wanted to avoid any strong shocks. The situation was unclear. If someone was alive, they needed to be seen. If dead, a body was needed. If she were to inform her mother that her youngest daughter had died based solely on their feelings, the consequences could be even more severe. Therefore, they sought help from all directions. Through a friend's introduction, Thao and Mrs. Sam found a renowned shaman in Quynh. The shaman's house was about 10 kilometers northeast of the city center of Mong Kai, nestled deep within a secluded, desolate forest, accessible by a narrow, damp, and winding path. Ancient banyan trees with tangled vines created a perpetually chilling atmosphere, starkly different from the bustling city, though only dozens of kilometers away. The shaman's house sat silently beneath an ancient banyan tree with a vast canopy, like a guardian shielding the home. Contrary to the rumors Thao had heard about this shaman, the person who greeted them at the gate was a surprisingly young woman, perhaps the same age as Thao, or only a year or two older. Out of politeness, both Thao and Mrs. Sam addressed her as Miss, as was customary. Upon seeing them at the gate, the shaman immediately stood up, looking sternly at them through the gate bars. "You're not here for charms to attract wealth, are you? You're here about a disappearance, aren't you?" Thao gasped, turning to Mrs. Sam with a look of surprise. Both remained silent. Suddenly, the shaman looked behind them for a few seconds, then back at them and asked, "Who is following you too?" Both of them looked pale and instinctively turned around, but behind them, only a clump of banyan leaves gently swayed in the wind. Thao also felt a shiver of unease and stammered, "Yes, we came to ask about something else." The shaman swept her arm in a circle, then opened the gate for them to enter. The gate, very old, with rusty hinges, let out a screeching sound. Both women exchanged nervous glances, then pursed their lips and followed the shaman. There was a garden plot about 4 square meters. On it were several small mounds of earth, each the size of a cooking pot. Each mound had a piece of yellow paper with strange characters Thao couldn't understand. The altar room was situated behind the main house, about 30 meters away, where the shaman received important guests. What met their eyes was a grim and eerie sight, pervaded by a thick, acrid scent of incense and immersed in an oppressive atmosphere. There were many red talismans with ancient, bizarre writings, making Thao shiver and step back. Calming themselves, the two sat on wooden chairs placed close to the altar table. After observing the scene, they saw that the altar room was quite spacious, but an eerie, formidable aura emanated from within, making Thao's entire body feel a chilling cold. In this altar room, dozens of incense bowls were displayed, arranged in 3 tiers behind a set of dark wooden partitions. The shaman looked at the two women for a few seconds. Before she could speak, Thao spoke up. "What are the spirits doing here in the living world?" The shaman replied without hesitation, "I don't know everything, but their purposes are different. Souls are divided into 2 types, vengeful spirits and the rest. Vengeful spirits are those who, upon death, still have unresolved grievances in the mortal world. Therefore, they are still bound to this earthly realm and cannot be reborn or find peace. They often retain the form they had in life, right at the moment of death. They usually try to cling to this world to resolve their personal grievances. The rest exist without a clear purpose and merely try to scare people." Mrs. Sam looked at the shaman, who was about Thao's age, for a few seconds, then stammered, "If a vengeful spirit resolves its personal grievances, what happens then?" The shaman lit 3 incense sticks, placed them on the altar, then turned to Mrs. Sam and said, "Whether a human senses a ghost or a ghost senses a human, everything is very ambiguous. If the vengeful spirits themselves cannot clearly identify their enemy, then what do you think will happen when they come to you? They will either try to harm you and steal your soul if it is a malevolent spirit, or they will try to give you some kind of warning if it is a benevolent spirit. If you encounter an evil spirit, the best thing to do is close your eyes and cover yourself, and most importantly, do not touch them. The mortal world has its rules and ghosts have their own. River water does not interfere with well water. Everyone lives their own way. But once you interfere, it's very difficult to undo, because vengeful spirits are often very persistent, no matter where you are. They will only leave you when their wishes are fulfilled." Then, leaving the two women amazed and bewildered, the shaman turned to them and slowly said, "Earlier, outside the door, I saw a spirit clinging to you both. This indicates that the spiritual door of both of you has a crack." Thao immediately trembled and stammered, "What is a spiritual door?" The shaman calmly took a sip of tea and replied, "When a person dies, the soul passes from this door to another world. That door only opens once in a lifetime at the moment of death. Because this door is very fragile and is an intermediary between 2 worlds, many people can see ghosts, but ordinary people cannot. The only way they can see them is through a special connection." Thao's face turned pale as she asked, "So, what can I do to close that crack and how can I talk to the spirit?" The shaman's expression became serious and she said, "I can give you a talisman. That is the way to dissolve the curse. As for talking to a spirit, it depends on whether that spirit can possess a body. Only then can it speak and clarify things. But there's also the possibility of another spirit possessing the body to cause trouble, or another spirit holding back the one you need to meet, preventing it from coming up." Understanding all the mysteries of the invisible realm, Thao recounted her sister's disappearance to the shaman. The shaman pondered for a few seconds, then handed Thao a plate with a pen and a piece of paper, saying, "Take out any banknote, clearly write down the hour your heart is troubled, and then place the banknote here. Remember to sincerely think of your sister." Thao nodded and did as she was told. A moment later, Thao received the paper back. The shaman placed it on the altar for a moment, then pronounced, "The troubled hour is the hour of Tai, on the day of then, in the month of then, in the year of Tao." This hexagram indicates that while the energy is hidden, it is not harmed by conflict, but it enters the grave at the moon's foundation position. Moreover, it falls under the White Tiger constellation, suggesting a great deal of ominous yin energy. In the hexagram, the phoenix is hidden, and the original spirit of the sun is broken and empty. From what I see, the person you are looking for has already lost consciousness. She may be dead. She will be found in an old house that once belonged to a family. You should search in the direction of north-northeast, about 10 to 15 kilometers away, in an old house near a water source like a pond, lake, river, or stream." Thao burst into tears, her voice shaking. After the horrifying dreams and the shaman's words, she now completely believed that her sister had little chance of survival. She and Mrs. Sam hugged each other, sobbing until their throats were raw. After a moment of overwhelming emotion, Thao pleaded, "Ma'am, I've heard your reputation for a long time. Please, ma'am, help me find my sister." Mrs. Sam also bowed down, repeatedly prostrating herself before the shaman. The shaman sighed, took a drag from her cigarette, then turned back and called out something. From a room, a little girl about 9 or 10 years old walked out. The child was wearing a gray monastic robe, holding a fabric doll, her hair tied in 2 buns, her face bright and clear. The child approached the shaman and listened to her whisper something, then suddenly looked straight out at the fence separating the altar from the empty lot next door, then looked at Thao and said in a chilling, broken voice, "She's dead." "Did you bring her things?" Thao was stunned for a few seconds, not understanding until the shaman urged her, "Did you bring any of your sister's belongings or personal items? If so, bring them out here." Thao quickly replied, "Oh, ma'am, I left in such a hurry earlier that I forgot. Now I beg you, please come to my house with me." The shaman nodded, then turned to the little girl and whispered some instructions. The child went back into the room, and a moment later returned with a small fabric bag, nearly as long as her lower leg. After lighting incense and casting a hexagram, the shaman said, "Leave in 15 minutes." 15 minutes later, Thao's Vespa was left at the shaman's house. All 4 of them went out to the road to catch a taxi back to Hanoi. Along the way, the little girl, Thai, repeatedly asked the taxi to stop. She would throw a handful of change onto the road, mumbling something. After 5 or 6 such stops, the taxi drove directly back to Thao's villa. Strangely, before Thao or Mrs. Sam could react, little Thai and the shaman immediately walked straight up to Quynn's room. The 2 went inside, whispered something, then came out. In the shaman's hand was a purple silk scarf, the scarf Quynh loved the most. As they left the gate, little Thai seemed to transform into a different person. She became sullen and quiet, her face turned pale, she looked profoundly sad, and curled up in the corner of the car. According to the shaman's instructions, the car sped off towards the outskirts. What made Thao begin to feel afraid was that the taxi was heading in the exact direction she had gone to look for her sister the other day, perfectly matching the information Vuong had provided. The sky at that time was turning dark, partly because it was already 3 p.m., and partly because a heavy rainstorm was about to hit. Gusts of wind swept dry leaves from the roadside into swirling masses. The deserted outskirts, combined with the strong winds, meant there were only a few vehicles scattered about at this hour. In the back seat, little Thai's complexion became increasingly distressing. Her earlier sadness had vanished, replaced by a hint of fear in her eyes. The child huddled in the shaman's arms, trembling as if she had caught a severe cold. The car drove past the abandoned house where Thao had encountered her sister's ghost yesterday. Suddenly, the child threw herself forward, her hands clawing at the window glass, her eyes wide open, gasping incoherently. Then she convulsed and collapsed, rolling onto the floor. The taxi driver, startled, quickly stopped the car and turned to ask, but the shaman motioned for silence. "Don't say anything. Did one of you 2 encounter the girl on this road yesterday?" Thao was shocked and pointed to the abandoned house with its dilapidated roof, stammering, "Yes, ma'am. I forgot to tell you earlier. Yesterday afternoon, when I was looking for my sister, she was standing right under this porch." Mrs. Sam's face turned pale as she looked out. The shaman laid little Thai down, took out her fabric bag, and told Thao to get out with her. She lit an incense stick, placed it in the ground, and chanted a prayer, then scattered some grains of rice around. After about 10 minutes, they got back into the car without saying anything further. The car continued on its way. Thai seemed less frightened. The child huddled in the shaman's lap, her eyes wide and dazed, staring intently at the road ahead. The shaman silently counted her fingers, then looked at Thai, whispering something. The child only nodded and pointed to a small road nearby. The road was overgrown. If one wasn't careful, it would be impossible to spot. Because the road was too narrow, the car couldn't drive in. Thao pulled out a 500,000 VND banknote, paid the driver without waiting for change, and told him, "My family is going to search for someone. Please wait here and pick us up. No matter how long it takes, I will pay you fully." The driver nodded and opened the car door. All 4 of them had just stepped out when Vuong's old Suzuki Viva car arrived. Earlier, before leaving, Thao had shared her travel plans and asked Vuong to follow them to search for her sister. The 5 people exchanged quick greetings, then proceeded down the overgrown path where tall reeds on both sides grew higher than a person's head. The further they went, the colder Thao felt. A chilling wind swept through, making the reeds sway and adding to her sense of dread. Little Thai was extremely agitated. She clung to the shaman's clothes, pressing herself behind her, but her eyes were fixed straight ahead. After leaving the overgrown path, what met the eyes of the four adults and the child was a scene exactly as the shaman had foretold earlier. It was a desolate, overgrown wasteland where weeds and trees grew wildly, obscuring part of the landscape. Standing prominently in the midst of this wasteland was a dilapidated, crumbling house. Beside the house was a waterlogged pond filled with murky water. Little Thigh huddled, her eyes wide and bulging, her mouth twisted as if she had suffered a stroke. She tugged at the shaman's clothes as if to rip them, then let out a whimpering cry. That cry, how familiar it was. And it couldn't possibly have come from a child of only 10, for it was clearly the voice of an adult. The child pointed to the murky pond and stammered incoherent words. The shaman picked up the child, looked at Thou, and said, "This child is suffering from a lost soul condition and hasn't undergone the opening of the mouth ritual, so she can't speak clearly. You should check down there. There must be something that frightens her so much." Vuong stopped Thou, then stepped forward, his experienced eyes noticing something unusual. The murky water at the edge of the pond looked as if it had been disturbed, and this disturbance extended onto the sparse grassy area, leaving a muddy trail as if someone had dragged something from the water. In just a few seconds, Quynn's Vespa was found there. Thou and Mrs. Sam collapsed in horrifying despair. Vuong immediately called the authorities to report and request a crime scene investigation team. Little Thigh, however, changed her expression. She tugged at the shaman's hand and pointed directly at the abandoned house. Thou then truly saw it. Inside the house, amidst piles of broken bricks, hundreds of discarded syringes lay scattered, along with several torn, dirty plastic bags. And in the corner of the dilapidated house, where a rusty crossbeam stretched across, Quynn's body was hanging, swaying gently. Her skin had turned a deep purple, her eyes rolled back, her tongue lolling out, and her mouth agape. Her body, met by the wind, swung back and forth, emitting a creaking sound. It was at this moment that Mrs. Sam and Thou collapsed to the ground, screaming in agony. 1 week later, according to the police investigation report, a diary was found in the house of the young man named Tuan. In it, Tuan confessed to directly killing Quynh because he couldn't hold on to her love. Tuan then committed suicide, haunted by the horrifying memories. Mrs. Dack, upon hearing the news from her daughter, fainted and had not yet regained consciousness. As for Thou and Mrs. Sam, neither could overcome the terrible shock. Quynh continued to appear in their home and in their horrifying dreams. On the 100th day since the body was discovered, the shaman once again arrived at the villa. She, along with Thou, Mrs. Sam, and Vuong, prepared offerings and returned to the wasteland. As the offerings were about to be concluded, the shaman suddenly turned and pointed directly at Thou and Mrs. Sam, shouting, "Don't follow them anymore." Both were startled. It was already dusk, and the wind began to blow. The shaman pulled out a paper effigy, muttered something that the three couldn't quite hear, and then set it on fire. Thou's eyes scanned through the howling wind, amidst the swirling incense smoke. In her mind's eye, Quynh, with her long, flowing hair and light purple dress, suddenly turned around and walked further and further away, slowly fading and finally disappearing into the misty smoke.